I'm going to ask you something, and I want you to be brutally honest in the comments. If the person who once called you a disgrace sent you a gold invitation to their fancy charity ball, would you show up? And what if you had to walk in with the 6-year-old proof that they were wrong the whole time? Because that's exactly what I did, and the room forgot how to breathe when they saw her eyes. 7 years is a long time to make peace with silence, long enough to fold yourself around a new life and pretend the old one never existed, long enough to learn how to carry groceries up 3 flights in the rain without cursing the universe out loud, long enough to memorize the bus schedule, the early morning cartoon theme songs, the smell of burnt coffee at the cafe where I've worked more shifts than birthdays. And then one Tuesday, an envelope showed up. Thick, black, heavy like a dare, with his family crest stamped in gold that dulled my kitchen light into something colder. Lily picked it up with careful fingers and turned it over like treasure. "Is it for us?" she said, and for a second my throat closed because I heard that word us, and I wanted to protect it like a flame cupped in wind. Lily has my hair soft brown, always slipping out of barrettes, but her eyes are his, the kind of blue that makes people pause and say something they think is a compliment. Striking, icy, unforgettable. And every time she looks at me, I remember a penthouse 20 floors above my pay grade, a skyline shining like it was rooting for me, and a boy in an expensive shirt turning into a statue right in front of me. I told him I was pregnant. He told me I was a disgrace. One word. Clean as a knife. So why did I go? Because secrets rot when you keep them in the dark, because I was tired of living a life measured against someone else's fear, because Lily traced that gold crest with her small finger and whispered, "A real party," with music, and I heard a child asking to see a world that once slammed a door in our faces. If it were you, what would you have done? Would you have gone? Be honest. I borrowed a black dress that fit like a promise and zipped it up with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. I curled Lily's hair and smoothed the rose-colored thrift store dress we'd found for $8 tags still on. We called a rideshare because we're not the kind of people who have drivers. And when the Blackwell Foundation Tower came into view, all glass stacked on marble, stacked on flowers flown in from a continent I can't afford, I felt Lily's small hand clamp down on mine so tight. I counted the bones I squeezed back and said, "We walk like we belong," because in that moment we did. Wealth hums. You can hear it in the way shoes sound on polished floors, in the laughter that glides over crystal in the quartet, playing a song that costs more than my rent. And there he was in the center of it, Aaron Blackwell, tux, pressed, smile, practiced hands loose like nothing on earth could catch him. He saw us. The smile paused like a bad edit, his glass stopped halfway to his mouth, and the room tilted. Conversations hiccuped. A waiter almost clipped a senator. I swear, the first violin squeaked, and suddenly it was quiet. Without being quiet, the kind of quiet where everyone pretends to speak, but nobody says anything. We didn't stop. We walked. Pattern interrupt. The air got thin. Yeah, that happened. I hadn't planned a speech, no note cards tucked in my clutch, no revenge monologue, rehearsed at 2 a.m. But when we were close enough for me to see the tiny stitches along his lapel, he breathed my name like the syllables were glass in his mouth. Emily, and then he looked at Lily, and then back at me, and I watched the question drag across his face like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Is she? I didn't let him finish, not because I wanted to be cruel, but because the truth shouldn't have to beg. She's your daughter, I said steady like I'd practiced on the bus, without meaning to. Her name is Lily. The rich don't gasp out loud. They do it with a blink and a whisper, like birds landing on phone lines. I could feel the math spread through the ballroom heads, turning like clocks 6 years old. Blue eyes, a resemblance you could balance a champagne flute on, And all at once I was a headline and a problem, and a mirror held up to a man who hated being seen without choosing the light. He swallowed. I watched it, and then he tried. Didn't know. Something inside me wanted to laugh, and then cry, and then throw the nearest crystal bowl at the nearest crystal, anything. But all I said was the truth in a voice no one could argue with. You knew there was a child you chose not to care. He flinched. Just a millimeter, but I saw it. I've been looking at that face inside my own head for 7 years, and I know the difference between steel and a man pretending to be it. A manager whispered to the quartet to keep playing conversations, restarted like people had found their bodies again, and he said, "Can we talk?" in a voice I recognized from before his name was printed on other people's buildings. We found a corridor off the ballroom, cool marble underfoot, a window framing the city like a painting, a hush so expensive that even your thoughts try to tiptoe, and a kind-faced attendant offered Lily a coloring book and a promise to stay within sight. I knelt eye level. "I'll be right there," I said, and she nodded, brave and serious, because that's who she is. He started with, "I'm sorry," and before you roll your eyes, before you type that apologies are nothing but cheap wallpaper over mold, hear me. The word was raw, not polished for press, not rehearsed for impact, he said. I was a coward and didn't take it back. I cared more about an image than a life. I told myself there was no child because that made the emails easier to ignore. I called it strategy when it was just fear wearing a suit. I said what needed saying, not bitter, just honest. Words broke this. You think words can fix it. And he surprised me by shaking his head. Fix. Try. Here's where most stories want a neat line. I tell him to leave. I deliver a speech that belongs on a tote bag. I walk back into that ballroom taller than a chandelier. But life is messier and kinder and heavier than tote bags. And there was a 6-year-old whose drawings of families live in a shoebox under her bed. A 6-year-old with questions I've dodged, because a child's heart is not a training ground for adult pride. So I laid it out like rules carved into stone. This isn't about you and me. This is about Lily. You don't get to disappear again. You don't get to make this a photo op. You don't get to call her your daughter in public until you've earned it in private. If you fail, I will lock the door and throw the key into the Hudson. Do you understand? And he said I do, and for once there wasn't a lawyer in the room. Do you think that's fair? Be real with me. We walked back toward the sound of money pretending to be generosity. Lily looked up when she saw me, then looked at him, 'cause kids are human lie detectors with bangs. Mama, who is he? And that is a question that slices a life into before and after. I don't lie to her. I gave that up like sugar one day at a time, so I said, careful, like carrying something breakable. This is Aaron. He and I are talking about family. Is it all right if he visits us and we see how that feels? She studied him like a scientist in sneakers and then nodded. Not movie, nod. Real kid, nod, okay. And then, twist of fate or mercy or toddler timing, she asked, do you like pancakes? He blinked and said he did, and she said, good, we have those on Sundays. Stick around because what happened next will blow your mind. The headlines the next day tried to sell a cartoon. I was either a schemer who crashed a ball to trap a billionaire, or a charity case he magnanimously allowed into a room. Both versions were wrong, and both versions made money. The real story never fits a column. It lives at a small kitchen table with a wobbly leg, where the radiator complains like an old man. And that Tuesday, he showed up without a driver, without a suit, carrying a paper bag of groceries, like a peace offering. He knocked like a person, not like he owned the hinge. Lily opened the door, because she's always halfway to any door. You came, she said. And he said, I came. and then looked at me for permission to step inside. I nodded, he did. If you've never watched a billionaire try to peel a sticker off a banana while a 6-year-old judges him, let me tell you, comedy. He fumbled, she smirked. I tried not to laugh and failed. He sat at our table and Lily slid a worksheet in front of him, with the polished authority of a first-grade teacher, tens and ones. She declared he repeated it like the phrase had been kept from him his whole life. And for the next hour, the three of us learned things we didn't know. We needed. We learned he couldn't braid hair, but wanted to. We learned laundromats can humble even a man who can buy out a floor of a hotel. We learned jam defies physics in the hands of a child. And when he flipped a pancake half onto the stove and half onto his sleeve, Lily laughed so hard she hiccuped, and he looked like he'd been handed a new planet. Small acts, tiny bricks, that's how you build anything real. 2 weeks later, just when I'd started to believe in forward motion, the past knocked with a different hand. A woman named Marta called from a number I didn't know. She sounded like she hadn't slept since the election. I was your ex's mother's assistant, she said. Can we meet? And we sat in a coffee shop where the tables wobble and the espresso tastes like someone burned their feelings into it. She slid a folder across the table with fingers that shook. 7 years ago, his communications head, Dalton, filtered your emails, your calls, even your letters, she said. He was terrified of scandal before the IPO. He told Aaron you had moved on, that you were asking for money. She pulled out a printout. He cropped a tabloid photo of you hugging a friend, so it looked like a new boyfriend. This is the original. My ultrasound, my messages, my voicemail transcribed and intercepted, all of it documented like a museum of things I never meant to be curatable. Here it was, the twist, the kind that doesn't let you stand up right away. I took the folder home and stared until the paragraphs turned to fog. Did it rewrite the night he called me a disgrace? No. Nobody forced that word out of his mouth, but it put weight on other scales, the ones labeled fear and power, and the people we hire to do our worst. Thinking for us. I showed him. He didn't rage about lawsuits or run for a microphone. He sat very still, like stillness was the only thing holding him together. I let myself be managed, he said. I traded love for control and called it strategy, and there was nothing in his face but a man who had finally found the bottom of the story he'd been telling himself. You know what I mean. When someone stops performing and you recognize them, not the best version or the worst one, just the human one. We told Lily what we could at her age, that families are built in different ways, that grown-ups sometimes make big mistakes and then spend years making them smaller. We didn't give her a tabloid script. We gave her pancakes. Public library cards, park benches, and permission to ask any question she wanted. She asked a good one. Why didn't you come? He said. I was scared and foolish, she said. Those are not good reasons, he said. I agree. And then she made him play tag in the courtyard, because apparently forgiveness requires sprinting. We kept building the small things. He was 5 minutes early, instead of 5 minutes late. He texted at noon to ask about the field trip. He sat on the floor and let her cover him in stickers because she called it a meeting, and he said, I'm listening. And for the first time I saw him admire a drawing more than a quarterly report. One warm night in late spring, we sat on a thrifted bench that creaked in the little backyard. The building Pretends is a garden. Someone had strung lanterns, and they swayed like they were listening. Lily fell asleep across our laps like a bridge built out of forgiveness and Cheerios. The city hummed a siren far away, a bike chain clicking, a neighbor singing off-key, and I told him. She'd mumbled in her sleep. Mom. Dad, don't let go of each other. Not a command, not a prophecy, just a child's wish that the world would stop wobbling. He looked at me without pleading, without demand, just a simple, "I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm asking you to let me earn a life where forgiveness is possible." And my heart did something complicated. It didn't melt. It didn't bolt the door. It did math I didn't know. I could do balancing fear with evidence, memory, with presence I didn't say. "I forgive you," I said. "Tomorrow, be at school at 3:10, not 3:15, she's watching." And he was there at 3:05. Of course, life doesn't stay quiet just because you want to practice a gossip site. Ran a close-up of Lily's eyes next to a close-up of his, and wrote a headline designed to make people click angry. The board called him a crisis manager. "With perfect hair," said, reconnecting 3 times. Like it was a magic spell, someone suggested a DNA test, like daytime television. He looked at me and waited, do nothing. I said, "Show up. Let your actions be the press release." He did. And that was harder than any interview. We went to a lawyer who smelled like peppermint and put Lily's name on papers that matter. He set up a fund for school because money shouldn't be the loudest voice, but it should at least pay for books. He told his mother's foundation that if they were going to put his name on a wall, they needed childcare in the budget for every staffer working those events. Hypocrisy makes him itch now. Yeah, that happened. So where does that leave us? Not in a fairy tale, not in a cleanly wrapped lesson in a life that is in motion. We burn pancakes some Sundays, and Lily insists they taste better. He learned to braid without pulling. I learned to let someone else carry a bag of groceries up the stairs without hearing the ghost of an old word in my head. Some days forgiveness feels like a road smooth enough to bike with no hands. Some days I trip over what I thought I'd already stepped past. Justice is not a gavel in a marble room. Sometimes it's a man on a kitchen floor tying a shoelace he should have tied years ago. And here's the part that might start an argument, and maybe it should. What does money do to our willingness to see each other? Was he cruel because he had money, or did money give him the tools to decorate his cruelty as strategists did? I soften because I saw him change, or because a college fund turns the volume down on my fear. If it were you, what would you have done? Would you have taken the invitation? Would you have walked into that room? Would you have let him come back the next day and the next, until the story sounded like something you could live inside? Do you think that's fair? I don't have a tidy ending for you. I have a beginning that arrived late and still counts. Lily sometimes forgets and calls him Dad. And when she does something in his face breaks and heals. At the same time, he doesn't take it for granted. He doesn't correct her. When she switches back to Aaron a minute later, he just keeps showing up. That's the job. That's the whole job. And if you came here for a verdict, I can't give you one. I can give you a life being lived out loud, with the door cracked for grace and the lock ready if needed. So now it's your turn. Should a person get to change when their change arrives with a driver and a board seat, or should a person be measured forever by the worst thing they said, when fear had its hand on their throat? Where do you draw the line between being right and being whole? Drop your answer. In the comments, argue with me, argue with each other. Keep it respectful, but keep it real. Share your own story. If you've ever stood at a locked door and decided whether to knock or walk away, like the video. If this hit you where you live, subscribe for more real, messy human stories, and tell me where you're watching from. City time. Maybe the thing you're ready to forgive or not forgive yet. I'll be there reading every word, and maybe tomorrow at 3:05 someone you love will be early too.